Hello, I'm Gabe, and we definitely have never met before, especially not in the restricted record sections in the Tribune offices. Yes, I am an intern, thank you for asking. I have been volunteered by my supervisor to come and educate the public about our new governing bodies. Everyone has a lot of questions about how things will work out, and we are doing our best to try and alleviate the concerns of the public that would naturally arise when a major shift in government like this occurs. So please, sit tight, and I will do my best to explain what the Tribune is and how it works. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying that our government is brand new. It's built on an existing structure that we all have some familiarity with, but there are still some things that might shift or change as time goes on. The structure and major components will remain the same, but the nitty-gritty details and traditions might not. Alright, moving on. So, you might be asking yourself why we're even shifting to the Tribune. Well, after the Hadria incident, it was found that there were several failings in the consulate/council model of government that allowed the incident to happen in the first place. So, in an attempt to keep that from happening again, we have drafted a new form of government that attempts to address those failings and prevent them from happening again. For example, it was determined that the secrecy of the Mage Council and its members is what allowed Governor Hadria to more easily breed resentment against the Council and Magi in general. So we have officially unmasked the Council and made them a public addition to the Tribune. The Tribune is our new highest level of national government, replacing the Consulate and Mage Council. The Tribune is effectively a merger of the two groups. It is composed of 11 members, 10 officers, and 1 speaker. 5 officers represent the nation's non-Magi, while the other 5 represent the Magi. The role of the speaker is unique because they can represent either the non-Magi or the Magi, but the position must change hands between candidates. The wording on my sheet here is a little odd on that, but I'll explain it after I get into the officers' term limits. Anyway, the role of the Tribune is to be the final vote on whether or not a piece of legislation becomes law, as well as guiding the political landscape between elections. You might have noticed that I said the Tribune is our highest level of national government. This is because, even in the wake of the Hadria incident, the Common House and the Upper House will be unaffected in the shift from the consulate/council model to the Tribune model. Despite the fact that many of our representatives were affected by the incident, they did not have any of the legislative power the consulate had, and will continue to fulfill the role of legislative construction they had prior to the incident. Each officer in the Tribune is allowed a 6-year term. Elections for officers will rotate through 2 3-year cycles. The first cycle, coming up in 3 years, will put up 2 Magi and 3 non-Magi. The second cycle, coming up in 6 years, will put up the remaining 3 Magi and 2 non-Magi, as well as the Speaker. And they can serve up to 3 full terms, for a total of 18 years. The Speaker also has a 6-year term, but is allowed to serve an additional 4th term if they choose to pursue it. However, no one can be elected to the position of Speaker if they have not first served at least 1 full term as an officer. The purpose of this condition is so that the Speaker, 1, has some political experience, and 2, is familiar with the system of the Tribune and is somewhat prepared to handle the challenges that come with being Speaker. If the Speaker goes up for re-election, or they have met their 4-term limit, then the position moves into the hands of the opposing group. To put that into layman's terms, the current Speaker is a non-Mage. If he opts to go up for re-election, he will then face off against one of the Mage officers who wishes to become the Speaker. If he does not go up for re-election, then the position becomes a contest between the Mage officers who wish to take up the position for themselves. But, unless the Speaker is removed from their post before the term ends, the position of Speaker cannot be held by the same group for each consecutive Speaker. This is to try and discourage any anti-Mage or anti-non-Mage legislation from being hastily passed by one group, because it will likely be easily undone by the other when they take back the position of Speaker and therefore the majority. You may have noticed that there are an equal number of non-Mage and Mage officers. This is intentional. The Union has been divided into 5 districts of roughly equal population, and 2 officers have been assigned to each district, 1 Mage and 1 non-Mage. This is so that each region of the Union can feel properly represented by our highest government, and so that neither side of the Tribune is dominated by, say, a bunch of people who have only lived in Capital City all their lives. Another reason that there is this equal divide is to help bring Mage issues to the non-Mage population and to educate the non-Magi how these issues affect them too. Now, for the next question. What are the qualifications to become an officer of the Tribune? If a person wishes to become an officer, they must be 1. At least 30 years old. 2. Residents of their region for at least 10 consecutive years. 3. Natural-born citizens of the United Nations of Iblis. Or 4. Naturalized citizens of at least 30 years. The qualifications to become the Speaker are very similar. An officer who wishes to become the Speaker of the Tribune must be 1. At least 35 years old. 2. A resident of their region for at least 15 consecutive years. 3. A natural-born citizen of the United Nations of Iblis. Or 4. A naturalized citizen of at least 30 years. And 5. An officer for at least 1 full term. The change in age and residency requirements for Speaker obviously stems from the requirement that they must have also served as an officer for at least 1 full term, and therefore could not serve at the lower requirement. Now I'm sure everyone is aware. An investigation into the crimes of former President Hadria revealed that the former consul, Devin Garrett, was compromised by the former president in what we understand to be a bid to take over the Union. In the wake of a revelation like this, I'm sure everyone is curious as to how we intend on handling an officer or speaker who has been compromised, either by a foreign or a domestic agent. An officer may be impeached if they are found to be 1. Unsound of mind, as determined by a panel of 3 impartial specialists. 2. Treasonous against the United Nations of Iblis and its territories. 3. Accepting bribes in return for some form of political favor. 4. Guilty of various high crimes and misdemeanors, including but not limited to perjury, murder, and obstruction of justice. So, on these grounds, former consul Devin Garrett, as an officer of the Tribune, could be impeached on the grounds of treason against the Union if the proper evidence could be provided. How exactly does this process proceed? Well, first, evidence must arise that an officer has committed an impeachable offense. An investigation is conducted to determine the validity of the evidence. At the end of the investigation, the special counsel then presents their findings to the upper house, which includes terms of impeachment if any are found. The upper house will then draft articles of impeachment and will vote to impeach the officer. If a majority of the upper house votes to impeach, the case then moves to the Grand Court, where it becomes a criminal trial. The Grand Court hears the case and decides the fate of the officer. After the investigation begins, the officer in question is temporarily relieved of their duties and is replaced by an appropriate representative of the upper house. If the upper house votes to impeach the officer, then they are completely removed from their position as they await their trial in the Grand Court. The only way they can be reinstated as an officer is if the Grand Court finds them not guilty, or they rule that the officer's crime was not severe enough to warrant an impeachment and allow the officer to finish off their term. If the Speaker is being investigated or impeached, then they are replaced with the most senior member of their group, who is then replaced by an appropriate member of the upper house. Now, if an officer is impeached and they are removed from their post, what happens? Then a special election is held no later than 6 months after the officer has been convicted by the Grand Court. If permitted by their party, the temporary officer may run for the position they have been holding. However, it will be up to the parties how to decide which candidate they would like to run for an open seat. In the meantime, until the new officer is sworn in, the temporary officer continues their duties as normal. This is a tumultuous time for our nation. We have been rocked to our very core by a traitor from within. The Tribune does not expect this to be an easy transition for anyone, but they are doing their best to smooth out any bumps along the way. They have already sent this out to all of the provinces, and many of them have ratified and agreed to the terms of the new tribunal constitution. A few of them are still holding out on us, but we are optimistic that they will also ratify the new constitution. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask now. If not, feel free to come back on Tuesday. I think they'll be having someone talking about Ellis the Damned, whoever that is. Hi, I'm Gabe, and it took me a lot longer than it should have to record this in Slate. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing so you don't miss the next one. If you want more content from me, consider following me on Twitter, where eventually I'll tweet some more. If you want to learn more about anything I'm talking about or catch some details I missed, consider buying my books. Links are in the description below. Also consider checking out the Tumblr, where I post side stories and art about the books that I can't really put anywhere else. Again, thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great day.